Oh, Ken, you hit the record button. You're ready to go.
I'm ready to go. That was my nudging you along to get started. We are recording. But what are you going to start with? Talking a little bit maybe about that little look at the 360 video, or I'll leave it with you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Ken, and thanks for getting involved in trivia. Got some prizes going out, so well done, everyone. I will just first get started. There's a couple chat questions I didn't get around to in Tuesday's session. One of them was just regarding the pavement bars that I kind of drew a little sketch on approaching either an intersection or where there's a conflict point. And yeah, there's a valid reason not to do it if it is going to be, you know, a significant hazard or if it's going to create instability for cyclists. But I just gave this example here. So these little bars, they're not, well, I guess they're kind of flush. They might have a little bit of a raised feature to it, but not enough to, you know, really wobble their handlebars. But it's just enough of a warning that cyclists approaching, you know, this location know that, okay, something's changing. I need to slow down. And the reason is because I need to give way to pedestrians at that zebra crossing. So it can be a really useful thing. If you are interested in this, there's a Queensland TMR technical note called Speed Management on Shared Paths. It was written maybe 10 years ago or so. So a little bit dated, but still got some good information in there. It's a good resource. So I'd encourage you to have a read of that if you are within this space. Another chat query, just wanted to confirm how the cycle-friendly fencing works. So I've included this kind of close-up image of what a cycle-friendly fence looks like. So this is that smooth deflection rail that's kind of jutting out. So that would be the first thing that you hit. And the unique part about it is, you know, the height that it's installed at is between the wrist and that shoulder height. So as you're riding along, if you were to collide with this, it might be easier in that photo there. You can see that this person's arm there would be striking that smooth rail as opposed to, you know, vertical members where a handlebar could get snagged onto. So that's the idea. You've just got this one smooth feature as opposed to lots of little individual hazards which can catch a cyclist. So hopefully that clarifies things. If not, feel free to get in touch and we can have an extra discussion after the session. But we will hop into a quick review of the first module's 360-degree footage. So hopefully everyone got a chance to review that from our last session and you got the goggles working. I would be interested to know if anyone did have any issues with the goggles or you found it really useful or it felt like you were riding the bike. We'd love to hear that feedback. But in that video, we did provide two different examples of how a shared path interacts with a road, how it crosses over the road. Example one is shown on the left-hand side there. Example two on the right-hand side. And Ken, I might get you to launch our first poll for the day, if that's okay. Get everyone engaged nice and early. Which example shows best practice design for a shared path crossing a road? Quite a long question, but which of those two examples do you think is an indication of best practice? And if you did use the goggles, which one did you actually feel safer crossing over? Give you a minute or so to complete that.
So yes, Cheston made a comment about the goggles and being a bit blurry, and there's a little trick to that which I will show, because you actually need to up your YouTube resolution to ensure that it's a higher resolution. I'll show that later on.
All the tips and tricks, yes. Maybe 5 more seconds and then we'll close that poll. But it's good to see we've got some feedback in early and it looks like it's all being one-sided. So might end the poll there.
And sharing results. Oh, last time we did a poll with this group, everybody was on the same page. They're still on the same page.
I know. I'm curious as to if everyone is actually sharing answers behind the screen there, Ken. This is We're not used to seeing this. We usually always get a bit of diversity, but it's good to see that at least everyone's picking the answers that I suppose Ken and I would pick as well. Example 1 there, definitely. It's raised. You've got priority as the cyclist heading straight across. If you did watch the video, you might have also noticed that, vehicles, they're slowing down and they're actually, anticipating cyclists to be there. And it's just a much preferred environment, much safer and much more attractive. So awesome to see that has been communicated to everyone here. Well done. I was also just going to mention today's agenda. We don't have any Wallies. So remember last session, we were counting the signs of Wally the Wombat. There's no Wallies in this presentation, so don't stress if you don't see him pottering about along the slides, because we don't have a quiz after today's session. We actually have an assignment. So I'll go through Ken's nervous. I'll go through the assignment at the end, but no Wally today because there's no quiz. So just wanted to bring that up early.
Wally. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll be behind the scenes monitoring the chat and, as per last time, feeding you questions. But let's dive into it, Max.
Cheers, Ken. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about on-road bicycle facilities. So previous chat was all about off-road shared paths. Now we're bringing the cycling facilities on-road. The best practice within this space is the first chapter that we'll go through today, which is protected bicycle lanes. And there's a couple different configurations that you can look at within that space. So it can be a one-way path, or it can be two-way, which is called bidirectional. And there's also going to be a bit of a conversation around what type of separators do you use to actually protect cyclists from general traffic. If you've never heard of the term protected bicycle lane before, no stress, we'll go through it in plenty of detail, so it will become very familiar by the end. Second part of today, we will cover different types of on-road cycle lanes and discuss the risk of dooring, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. If you are a cyclist, maybe it's something you've experienced yourself, either as a near miss or you know someone, or you've been hit yourself. Very, very unpleasant feeling. We'll talk about some different on-road treatments that can also be provided that improve the situation, but may not necessarily remove that dooring risk. So things like pavement markings, chevrons, exclusive bike lanes, wide curbside bike lanes. The last two probably not as popular choice these days. We tend to see protected bicycle lanes. That's offered as a much better provision for cyclists rather than those two there. But we'll also just have a brief chat about it, just so you're aware of what they look like and where they may be appropriate. And the final point of today will be actually mixing the traffic. So rather than have a separate space for cyclists at one side of the carriageway and then general traffic, they have this part of the carriageway, bringing all of that space together. So general traffic and cyclists all share the one kind of lane. And we'll talk about exactly the best way to manage that. So plenty to get through today. So I'm just going to get stuck right into it. And we'll talk about protected bicycle lanes. Here's a fantastic example of one. This one is within Melbourne. The Module 2 360-degree video uses this as an example. So you'll get to see this once you have a look at the video after today's session. You'll get to see it in 360 degrees. So it's a really fantastic example of what this infrastructure looks like. For those that haven't heard the term, I'll just bring it back to the basic cross section. What we're used to seeing in general road design is, the footpath next, obviously next to the boundary where all the, commercial or residential properties are, and then your curb, which brings you back down onto the carriageway. And typically that's where the car parking would be. So we put our car park right next to the footpath. That's generally how most cross sections work. And then on the other side of the car parking lane is where a bicycle lane would be traditionally. A protected bicycle lane flips that arrangement and it pushes the car parking lane out from the curb and channel, so out from that line there, and replaces that with the bicycle lane. And the reason that we do that is because now you've created this separation between cyclists and the general traffic lane. So that's the lane that's actually traveling adjacent. So you've got separation from that lane as well as separation from the parking lane. So you're kind of removing two lots of risks for cyclists. They don't need to worry about a car that's, traveling behind them at 40, 50 kilometers per hour and, could be veering into the bicycle lane, which is, that does occur. And they also don't need to worry about the dooring risk, because the driver opening their door on the right-hand side, they'd be opening it now into a live traffic lane as opposed to a bicycle lane. So these protected bicycle lanes are a really big winner and a really important way to improve the safety and the attractiveness of cycling infrastructure. I'll turn my heater off, getting very warm in here. And there's a couple of configurations within this space, which I will hop into. But before I get into that, I will just, bring this back as to, well, why would we bother to do this? And if we're looking, strategically, and we identify that cycling is important within our communities, within certain areas, there's a particular corridor where we really want to improve the safety for cyclists and that connectivity. This is, a study that was conducted 5 years ago, and there's been many similar studies since, so there's plenty of the examples out there, but it's just an indication of how the general population view certain treatments. And you can see within a protected bicycle lane, 83% of the community feel confident to ride. There's always going to be a portion that don't want to get on a bike or don't want to be anywhere that isn't off-road. So you may not be targeting that particular demographic when you're building protected bicycle lanes. But if we compare that to what's traditionally built out there, only 22% feel confident to ride where it's just a painted lane. So if we are really trying to promote this uptake in cycling, we need to be building infrastructure that kind of matches that demand. And rather than just, going again and again with the kind of traditional approach to building bicycle lanes, we need to acknowledge that people really appreciate, a safer, more, separated treatment away from general traffic, as opposed to being really, really close, because they just don't feel comfortable in riding there. So it's just a bit of a key takeaway there, that it's both a safety thing and it's a perception of safety. And you build these protected bicycle lanes and you will see the cycling volume numbers greatly increase. Here is a typical cross-section of what a one-way path would look like. So this is where you would have protected bicycle lanes on either side of the carriageway. So you've got one adjacent here, one adjacent here. So it only allows for cycling in that one direction on that side of the road. So, and it follows the side of the road where the lane direction is as well. So it kind of makes a lot of sense. This would likely be the most common arrangement, depending on which jurisdiction you're in, but this is, very, very common out there. I know lots of Sydney and Brisbane, you have another type, the bi-directional, which we'll hop into, but this is a very typical arrangement. And a few other things to note within this typical cross-section that might be easier to explain on this slide. But the gap between the parking lane and the bicycle lane, we tend to call that a separator. So that little thing there, because it separates, motor vehicles from cycling traffic. So that's called the separator. I'm going to be using that term later on, so I thought I'd just bring that up now. And there's lots of different ways that you can mark out that separation. So we will get into different treatment options there. Here's an example of a one-way path. This is commonly referred to as a Copenhagen lane, for those that have heard that term before. This is a really good example where you've actually got kind of formalized curbing and like an asphalt infill to completely separate the parking lane and the cycle lane. There's other treatments out there, as I mentioned. However, I might open this up to the group. Anyone want to guess why there's this little gap in the middle of those two kind of separator islands? So you've kind of got one and then a gap and then another one.
So lots of guesses coming in there. Cheston's pointed out that his workplace is just outside the Wellington Street one there, 1 Mile Grid offices in that area. So that's good. We see a lot of stormwater drainage, water drainage.
Wonderful. Yes, drainage. That's exactly right. I might give the prize out to the first one that got that one, Ken. That'd be good.
There's Jeremy. He's quick off the mark.
So if you were to construct this in an existing environment, it's a lot easier if you can maintain the existing, pits and all the existing curb and channel that is out here, as opposed to relining all your drainage. So in other words, you want to keep that existing drainage line operational. And so if you put these gaps within the separators, what that means is, when it's really heavy rain, water can feed through here and then drain off to wherever the existing pits are. If you, had it fully continuous the whole way, you'd have water pooling within the parking lane and potentially flooding issues. So you'd have that as an issue, or you'd have to, as I said, move all your drainage line, and it'd just be very, very expensive. So it's a super common thing to do within these protected bicycle lanes if you are using this type of treatment, just to put gaps in every now and then so you've got adequate access for the water to dissipate and safely get away.
And what are the larger gaps for, Max?
This gap here, I'm guessing there may be an entrance to a private driveway or some type of access point there. So it could be something like that. And the reason I say that is because it's also green there, the green conflict paint, which would suggest that there may be a potential conflict point between general traffic and cyclists, similar to that location. Good question though. The other configuration you can use within a protected bicycle lane that's also relatively common, the bi-directional path. And as you would have seen from our previous one, we had, one lane of traffic on either side of the carriageway. In the bi-directional path, we're actually providing cyclists two-way travel on one side of the carriageway. So instead of, accessing both sides, you're only allowed to cycle over here. It can work really, really, really well, in certain environments. However, there also can be some limitations with this approach. I'll go through all the pros and cons in a sec, but I just wanted to highlight that there are some, this is the general kind of cross-section, what you'd expect to see within a bi-directional protected bicycle lane. And one of the things that you'd hope to be catering for is that all of the points of interest for cyclists are on one side of that carriageway. If you would expect cyclists to be, wanting to access both sides of the carriageway, then you're only really providing the demand on one side, which may not be such a great outcome for cyclists, because they may have to then cross the road intermittently or wherever they want, which could be a safety issue. There's a few things to consider within this space. Got another photo here which shows a bi-directional bicycle lane in place. Another question, we've got some really good thinkers here, Ken. So this one's a little bit trickier, but we'll see how we go. You may have noticed that the other separators were a lot wider. This one is about 300 mil or so. Could anyone have a guess as to why this particular example, the separation between this lane here where the traffic goes and the bicycle facility, why that separation would be smaller.
Quick.
I think we've got some switched on participants.
Yep. So the parking, no parking there. And one sort of about vision of that as well. But yeah, predominantly people are saying there's no chance of dooring because there's no parking there.
That's exactly right. So that the wider separations that were previously shown, they were all next to parking lanes. This example, it's a little bit difficult to see, but it is actually a through lane, which means you wouldn't expect vehicles just to, you know, pull up the handbrake and park and open their doors. So the risk of the dooring is greatly reduced, and therefore that separation width can also be reduced. Really good pickup though. Well done. We might give the prize out to the first that said parking there, Ken.
It was Jeremy again. But I'm going to give it a second.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah, because I think could be an internet speed issue. Yeah, where's the pram ramp going?
That is a good question. I've been meaning to follow that up on this slide. Yeah, it appears it goes to nowhere.
Well, yeah. Or is it to get the bike parking? I mean, it looks like it's new. Is it a place to get your bike off there to parking? Or I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a bit unclear.
Yeah, good point, Ken. It could be used to access those bicycle hoops there to get your bike off there.
Yeah.
Good vision. Tell you what, Ken, give yourself a prize. That was good vision.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. I'll keep on heading on. So provided this little advantages, disadvantages kind of table between those two different configurations we talked about. So the single lane and bidirectional lane. And this is more just as a reference, but it might be easy just to talk through this with practical examples. But we basically, as a general rule of thumb, as to this topic here, you know, the cycling facilities are present on both sides of the carriageway. Within the single lane, yes, that's true. Bidirectional, no. Cyclists are forced onto one side of the carriageway. So if they want to access, you know, a shop or a hospital that's on the other side, then they have to cross over that carriageway. And if you don't have, you know, safe crossing points where cyclists want to cross over, that can be a safety concern. I think the last couple are probably the most relevant though. So vehicles entering, exiting driveways, they have a reduced number of conflict points. The way that you're actually expected to look as a motorist, we're trained to kind of look at a certain direction, which means we're focused on one aspect and not another. I'm just going to hop straight into the examples because it makes a lot more sense when you're actually looking at some photos. So I've got this mock-up here of a vehicle that is exiting a you know, private car park or something like that and entering a carriageway, crossing over a bi-directional facility. And this is a one-way traffic environment that they're crossing into. Intuitively, and if you could put yourself within the driver's seat in this instance, your attention is focused on oncoming traffic because you're looking for a gap in the traffic, which means cyclists traveling towards you, you'll have a fairly good chance of recognizing them or seeing that they're there. Conversely, it's not really within our DNA or the way that we've kind of grown up and taught to drive to look the opposite direction, to look to the right-hand side, which means a cyclist traveling in the opposing direction may not be noticed. And so there is that increased risk of a collision within that space. And I'm not using this as an example to say that, well, that means we can never do bi-directional lanes because, you know, that risk is there. There's still lots of benefits to bi-directional facilities, and yeah, it's not meant to be, you know, a negative critique on this feature. It's just something you need to consider if you were doing this type of design. If you had lots and lots and lots of these driveways and they just kept cropping up time and time again across the alignment, that might then raise a flag, hey, maybe we shouldn't actually put this type of facility here because it may not be appropriate. We could go for a single lane protected bicycle lane. However, another way to mitigate this risk, as you can kind of see within this particular mock-up, what they've done is, they're highlighted that this is a green zone. So it's, expect cyclists, this is a conflict point. You can do signage, before there as well, and also kind of look both ways. Admittedly, once you get into that space, you're not really removing the risk, you're just reducing it, but something to consider if you are within this space. Another thing as well for bidirectional facilities, similar vein, is a right-turning vehicle that would have to cross over the facility. So in this markup, this is from the Transport for London, just did this as an example. If that vehicle there were turning right into that side street, they would instinctively be looking straight ahead for the gap in traffic. Once they had that, they would be looking for cyclists that are heading, towards the screen or into the screen. It is incredibly difficult to be able, as a motorist, to be able to spot a cyclist that would be traveling at speed, potentially the same speed as you within that environment, and be able to adequately give way to them as you're turning right, because it's just very, very difficult to be able to be looking in all those different places at once. And so once again, there is that risk of a collision with the cyclist and the right turning motorist within that space. A good kind of mitigation measure that they've got in this example is they've got this little gap here where that right turning vehicle can kind of focus on traffic first, turn right into it, and then store and wait within this space here. Hopefully you can see my scribbles. And then once they're pausing there, then that gives them an opportunity again to pause, look left and right when it's safe to do so, cross over. A lot of the time though, that kind of storage area isn't provided, and it is another risk that would need to be considered, exactly how that could be managed. So just a few things to consider if you are within the bidirectional space. I'm going to hop into some separators. So there are lots of different types and treatments available. This is generally what people think of when they think of protected bicycle lanes. So like a permanent type of concrete curbing with some type of either concrete or asphalt infill. It's more of a landscaping streetscape project. Looks nice, looks like a final product kind of thing, but there are other options out there. So I'll go through them, but before I get stuck into different products, one of the things that regularly comes up when doing protected bicycle lanes, and I can already see it in that photo, is the curb profile that you use for your protected bicycle lanes does make a big difference for the safety for cyclists. So for those that aren't aware of different curb profiles, we've got this kind of thing here, which is called a barrier curb. So it's just like a straight up, vertical face. And then we've got a different type of curb called a semi-mountable, which is, more forgiving. It's got a like a 45-degree angle kind of thing, and you can actually get up there if you needed to, and just, it's got a more forgiving profile to it. In the first photo, what we can see is a barrier curb has been installed on the bicycle lane side and a barrier curb, that vertical face, on the parking lane side. And it gets a cross for the bicycle lane, but it gets a tick for the parking lane. Now, the reason is we don't really need to, force cyclists to be very strictly following within that bicycle lane. If there was an emergency and they needed to get out of veer out of the bicycle lane and get onto that separator, the provision of a semi-mountable curb seems like a pretty logical solution. So it makes sense that, you know, we can provide that on the bicycle lane side of things. Conversely, we don't want to see a semi-mountable on the parking lane side of things. And the reason for that is because motorists will park on it. If they don't have a physical vertical barrier curb, they will just go straight onto that and then park much closer to the bicycle facility, which means you may have that dooring risk again. So instead of having this beautiful protected bicycle lane, you've potentially just developed a, you know, not quite as a good example of what it could be. So in the very right-hand side is kind of what we would recommend within this space, which we've got semi-mountable on the left-hand side, which is the bike lane, and barrier curb on the right-hand side. And we do actually have an example of what this looks like. This was in a audit that we did recently, and we can see that on the bicycle lane side, we have a semi-mountable curb for that more gentle kind of profile, which is a good thing. On the other side is also that gentle profile though, and you can see all the vehicles there are parking straight up on the separator. So it just brings motorists much closer to the bicycle lane and you're reducing the separation. So you can see really good example there of what that looks like, and something that you want to try and avoid with just a simple design decision in your curb profiles. Ken?
So Sam's asked, these examples look like retrofits. The best practice be to have semi-mountable on both sides of the bike lane?
Oh, on both sides of the bike. Okay, so they are mostly retrofitted. That's a good point, Sam. And which means you've already got a barrier curb on the, you know, the curb side or the footpath side of a bicycle lane. Would it be best practice to have semi-mountable there as well? It wouldn't hurt. I think you might have maybe some kind of drainage. I know that drainage engineers get very nervous when there's different curb profiles kind of suggested on that side of the carriageway. So if it didn't have any issues with that, I'm not sure that I mean, I think that would be a good suggestion. Yeah. Ken, anything?
Oh yeah, no, I was going to agree with that. I mean, from the cyclist perspective, the more mountable, the better. It's just, can you drain? Can you operate your drainage sufficiently?
Yeah. It would add a lot more expense to the project. Yes, yes, it would. That's just that photo there at night, so you can see that that was a semi-mountable curb on the parking lane side, and that's the barrier curb there. Just to confirm, if anyone didn't understand that. So if we had to put the barrier on that side as well, something like that, then you'd be very much less likely to encounter motorists parking up on there. Another important consideration with the protected bicycle lanes is if you've got any disability parking bays within that space, thinking about exactly how you're going to manage the movement from the parking bay to the footpath, because there's no use, you know, continuing a separator along in this space and just hoping that they can safely access, you know, the adjacent footpath there. So this is just a reminder that we do need to provide brakes adjacent disability parking bays. We need to provide curb ramps within those areas. And they've also, you know, just shown, hey, this is a little bit of a conflict point here as well. You could do a little zebra crossing there as well, which I think is a good idea, just to give priority for people with disabilities accessing those bays, you know, assurance that cyclists will stop within that space. Here's a not so good example of this kind of in practice. So it's a little bit hard to see, but this is a protected bicycle lane. Oh, and there's those little pavement bars as well. Just saying to give way as you're approaching this crossing point. So this is for general pedestrians to access the bus bay that's adjacent there. It's awesome that they've got the pedestrian crossing signs up, and it's great that we've got a little zebra crossing. As I said, big fan of the zebra crossing. I think intuitively everyone knows what that is. You know, got to slow down, give way to pedestrians. It's just part of our psyche, which is great. But what they haven't done is provided pram ramps or anything. So you have to step down onto the carriageway or onto the bicycle lane and then step back up. And for anyone with, disabilities or mobility impairments, that is not, a very favorable situation. So missed the mark there with no pavement, with no pram ramps. Another thing you could have done on this particular example is if you actually raised, all of that becomes one level, and then you basically create a ramp up to there, like a speed hump. So then it gives priority very clearly to people that are crossing over that facility, and cyclists are forced to slow down. So I think that's a really good example of what you could do there. Talk about some more separators though. So we had a look at this one on a previous slide, the more narrow one, which is appropriate where you've got no parking adjacent the bicycle lane, because then you've removed that door risk. So you can see they're a lot narrower there. This is a retrofit kind of treatment, because you can see it's actually like a bolt down product, which makes it a fairly attractive thing to be doing. If you are working, and trying to test the waters or trying to do any trials of protected bicycle lanes, these products are fantastic, because you're not committing to, permanent concrete and, designing particular curb profiles and getting into real detailed design of particular characteristics. You've got these products that you can order off the shelf. They kind of come together like little jigsaw pieces. They all fit together, and you can just bolt them into the ground. And you can then advertise that to the community who may not be particularly excited to have, a traffic lane missing or a parking lane gone or something like that. You can say, well, this is a trial. We'll give this a go. We're using materials that can be, reused on other projects, etc. And it's a way to test to see how the protected cycling facilities are received by the community, and hopefully they are received positively. And then you can later on in the track formalize this with more permanent treatments if you choose to. Garden beds or planters, fairly common as well. They can be really beautiful as a streetscape treatment, to make it look a lot more attractive to ride next to, and also just to be around. So where you've got dining and things like that. So I'm a bit of a greenie. I love my plants and love getting out in nature and everything like that. But I've got a little bit of a qualm in this space, which is, it might look very beautiful day one when everything has just been planted and been taken care of, but a couple years down the track, or maybe there's a big storm event or something like that, and planters get knocked over, or things get unruly and hedges aren't maintained and things like that. Is there a plan to continue that beautiful streetscape look, or is it gonna, create other issues, such as leaf litter kind of being brought up here, or as I said, if these get too big and wily, then you could have sight line issues as well, motorists seeing cyclists and the other way around. So it sounds a bit pedantic, but it unfortunately, seen it happen too often, where it looks very pretty, and then a couple of years it gets forgotten, and then no one really maintains it. And also, that's another good point. I've just got a message there. A plant, or those planters being installed at pedaling height. So it's an opportunity for pedals to then strike and get caught on those features as well. So if it's within that half meter space that we talked about, that's considered a hazard. So bang on. Here's another one. More planters being used, and also intermittently got these kind of little strips that are also being used. Anyone know where this particular tower is located, where this photo was taken?
Jeremy's quick again on Auckland, and we had some guesses of Wellington, Berlin. But is it Auckland? It's
Auckland, bang on. Federal Streets in Auckland.
Yep.
Looks awesome. They've got lots and lots of colourful pavement marking, as you can see. I'll get you a little bit closer to the intersection. Kind of brings up to that point that I was talking on before. This is a relatively new construction, not that long after this was installed. You've already got, you know, dirt kind of on the carriageway there, and it looks like some of these planters have already been struck by motorists. So yeah, it's something to consider if you are within this space, that maintenance implication of these things, because as a community project, looks awesome and it can get things across the line, but long term, who's going to look after it? Something to consider. Oh, these little guys here, love these little guys. Much smaller than what we're used to have seen. They're just above ground height kind of thing. And I tell you what, we might give out a prize, Ken, if anyone can guess what this product is called. And I'll give you a hint. It is named after an animal that it looks like. So if you can think of an animal that looks like that, and then just chuck it in the chat, you might be right.
Well, we got guesses of zebras, bumblebees, and armadillos. So,
very good. I might give it to armadillos. That is the correct term. There's a black and white version that gets called the zebra, so you're not far off. And the bumblebee is also just a great answer. Like that's what I would call it. I think they missed the mark there. That's a bumblebee to me. But just to recollect, that's what the armadillo looks like. So they're not far off. You can see that the shape there for sure. But I prefer the bumblebee.
You said you like these little. Oh, do you like them because of that part of it? For a bike rider?
Yeah, sorry, I should expand on that. You're right. I like them in the sense they're made from 100% recycled material, and they're also 100% recyclable. So they're good in terms of sustainability. And if you are, you know, spruiking that as part of the project, then this is probably a good one to lean towards. However, in terms of the safety, not quite as good. I mean, you can see motorists would have a hard time seeing, particularly the zebras, because they're black and white, and our carriageway is black with white lines. So very easy to lose those, you know, particularly in low light conditions or torrential rain, which then reduces the overall effectiveness of providing a separator. So I like one aspect of them, and another aspect maybe not so good, but they are used pretty extensively in North America and Canada. Yeah, we've got some in Western Australia.
Yeah, Cole was just pointing that out. Yeah, the non-continuity of them disturbs me. That each one of them presents as something to hit, rather than when you use like a longitudinal longer strip, it's just you can drift into it and you sort of glance it, and then anyway, but that's just
anyway, I don't want to push you towards any product. We're not sponsored by any suppliers, in case you're wondering.
No, and Sam's also putting in there point about motorcyclists not liking them, whether or not that's just a perception, or there's been incidents, or there is risk there. But these are all things to consider.
Yeah, that's spot on. And that photo was actually taken in Perth, as an FYI. This kind of arrangement, I would prefer to see this. I like these. These have got the paddles, the vertical members. They're actually flexible. So if a vehicle or a cyclist were to strike them, it's not fixed. It's going to bend down and then hopefully bend back up and stay upright. This is a pretty good way. Once again, it can be a temporary treatment because these are just bolt down and you can get them in all different shapes and sizes. But automatically, because of its raised function, you've got a lot more delineation. It's a lot easier for motorists to see all right, something's going on in that space that I don't want to be near. And they may incorrectly assume that it's roadworks or something like that, but as long as they stay out of there, that's probably a win for the cyclists. So we're seeing lots and lots of these being rolled out in Melbourne. We've got a pop-up bicycle lane program, which is being run across the state of Victoria. And these are becoming more and more prevalent. Another example of this is this particular product. Same vein, but yeah, we're seeing lots and lots of these, and I think it's a good way to separate this. This particular photo, actually, I might just bring this up. During COVID, this was actually a general traffic lane as well, and cyclists had to ride on a footpath, and this is like a heritage bridge. So for anyone that's worked in that space, you know that that footpath is already very, very narrow. So the idea that cyclists had to, get off the carriageway and ride in a super narrow space with lots of pedestrians and then get back on was a terrible outcome. During COVID, they decided to take up a traffic lane and said they'll trial this as a protected bicycle lane. And yeah, we're still got it installed, close to a year and a half, 2 years later. And the cycling community just love it. It's a really big win. It's such a big improvement. Sorry, that's one of my regular rides. That's why I was very passionate. Just wanted to mention this very last one. This is just like a flexible bollard that's kind of installed, at regular intervals, but it's just its own individual units as opposed to having that base that was shown prior. So it doesn't really have the same effect at delineating the space. The other reason I don't really like this is actually got part-time parking. So during peak periods, you're not allowed to park there, but at other times of the day, you're allowed to park there, which means we shouldn't be looking at such a narrow treatment anyway. If we've got parking at any time of the day, we should be trying to provide a greater width of separation for our cyclists. Okay, I might pause here and ask the group, because it is that time of the day, what's wrong with this photo apart from that confused cyclist? So let's get him out of the way. Have a look in the photo, see if you can spot anything that you may think, or something that grabs your eye with this photo, and chuck it in the chat, please.
All right, let's see what comes in here. Okay, we've got no protection, dooring, mirror, dooring, no separator, heads in the cycle lane, bike lane not defined.
Very good. Yes, lots of good answers. So dooring is certainly the big
80% won't feel comfortable here.
And you can understand why within that photo, can't you? Just that row of cars and just, white knuckled riding through there, hoping no one opens their door. But yes, the issue I was going for there was the dooring one. So let's give a prize out there, Ken. But let's give a prize out to the person that noted pedestrians within the bicycle lane. We've actually got a skateboarder there, and that's a scooter rider. Very good vision to spot that. I'm impressed.
Okay, I'll work out who I'm giving prizes to.
Yes. So dooring, I'm sure, as we're all aware, it's a very real cyclist issue. A door can swing approximately 1.2 meters away from the vehicle. So it's pretty far. And usually we have our bicycle lane 1.2 meters wide, right up against the parking lane. So usually that's 1.2 as well, which means if a door does open, a cyclist has to enter the live traffic lane or hit the door. And a cyclist may not know what's behind them. Cyclists don't generally have mirrors. And here's actually an example of a near miss, thankfully, of one of our very own. I'll see if hopefully this plays. You can see the door just swinging open there and someone getting out of their car, but the cyclists luckily skilled enough to avoid the door and swerve around. Ken, if I'm not mistaken, is that you on that bike?
It is me. Yes, Max and I were out doing some cycle auditing. We had the 360-degree camera on Max's head, so able to turn it around and do that. Yes, but it's a constant thing to look out for as a cyclist, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. So it is a very real issue, and providing the protected bicycle lanes, we've kind of mitigated that risk. We will go through some options now to talk about other types of treatments within the on-road cycling space. But just to give you a bit of background, this figure's always interested me as to why it ever needed to be conducted as a study, but it's basically saying 75% of door-in collisions that occur between a cyclist and a pedestrian are occurring on the driver's side. Makes a lot of sense given that the bicycle lane is generally on that side, and also if there's ever a car door opening, odds are it's going to be a driver's side because you need a driver. This percentage may take you a bit more by surprise to 25%. These could include collisions where you do have a really narrow separation at protected bicycle lanes and you've got door opening and you haven't provided adequate separation. Another example of this potentially occurring though is if you imagine a vehicle is stopped at a traffic light and then the passenger, could be a taxi for instance, a passenger just wants to get out and that happens to be where the bicycle lane is, they might just fling open their door and then that's a collision there as well. No great surprises though to see that the majority is occurring on the driver's side. We've got this figure here, which is just a strategic way of looking at what treatments may be appropriate in different strategic functions of corridors. I won't go through the details, but feel free to review that if you are looking at things from a very high level, what may be appropriate. I'd rather get stuck into the treatments. We've got this on-road bicycle lane. And as I said before, you know, I'd much prefer to see protected bicycle lanes. So bring that bicycle lane over there and bring the parking on the other side. But this is just an example of, you know, what's typically traditionally been provided across the network, a bicycle lane that looks like this. What they decided to do as a trial is paint the green conflict zone, but only in this really little narrow strip. And the intent of that is, well, let's try and get cyclists riding more there as opposed to closer to the dooring zone. So it's actually closer to the general traffic lane and also closer to the light rail or tram tracks. However, that trial was deemed to be successful and that's still installed there on this particular arterial road. So average motorists, they actually tended to track closer to the center line. So as in this vehicle here, this is what the study showed, ended up driving a little bit closer to the center line, so away from the bicycle lane. So that's a positive. And 75% of cyclists surveyed for this particular trial said they felt more comfortable with just that little narrow green strip. I'm not going to advocate this as something that we should be implementing across the network. I'd much rather, you know, toot the horn for protected bicycle lanes, but just interesting to see that there are, I suppose, little wins within this space that could be you know, used in future projects, but I would not suggest that this is what we should be doing everywhere. New Zealand did a similar thing. They did little striped green dots within the bicycle lanes. This is in Hastings in New Zealand. The intent of it isn't actually for cyclists to ride on the green dot that happens to be shown in this photo. It's just a reminder for vehicles that are traveling adjacent. You know, they may view this as just a shoulder, you know, somewhere that they can access if they want to. but the green stripes are just a reminder this is cycling space. So another way to achieve this could have been doing, bicycle symbols every 50, 100 meters or whatever. But they decided to try this green stripes, and I believe that that's still being evaluated. So I can't confirm its effectiveness either. But once again, I wouldn't expect that to really solve the issue. Things that we can do within on-road. So if for whatever reason we do have to keep parking curbside and we can't create protected bicycle lanes, double chevron is what this fancy type of treatment is called. Sorry, fancy word, but for those that are familiar, the chevron is just that kind of shape. And that is painted on the carriageway. And it's called double because it's on both the parking lane side and the general traffic side. There's a few different minimum, maximum widths that you can use if you are within this space. So we typically go for a 600 mil to 1.2 meters, and same on that side. For those who were listening earnestly before, they would have heard that 1.2, that's the width that a door can swing open. So if you can provide the 1.2 meters on the vehicle dooring side, that would be a very positive thing to do. However, you've got to work within what your existing road reserve allows, and within budget constraints and things like that. But double chevrons are actually a reasonably good facility to have for cyclists, particularly if it's in lower volumes and lower speeds. It's a fairly comfortable setting to ride. You may not be getting, that 83% that feel comfortable in riding there, but you're certainly a long way from just providing, one white line and say that's the bike lane there. A single chevron, so this is where you've only got one of those chevrons that is installed adjacent the parking lane. You would go for this approach if there was high turnover of parking traffic. In other words, you would expecting the door to be opening very often. That's when you'd put the chevron on this side. I'll just skip through the next slide, which has just got those dimensions again for you. Here's just an example of that in practice. You could also install the single chevron adjacent the traffic lane. So you can see it's adjacent the traffic lane. You would go for this approach if that was long-term parking. So that's in front of residential areas, permit zones, things like that. That's what the guidance within this particular source suggests. Anecdotally, I'm generally a lot more concerned about a door opening than a vehicle from behind striking me if there's good sight lines and things like that. Just because I think that a vehicle has a much improved chance of seeing you if you're within their windscreen and they're already looking ahead, as opposed to someone that's just in their car and automatically just flinging open a door. I just think that's a really common thing to happen. And yeah, true enough, like vehicles who may be within the live traffic lane can still veer over to the left and, had that type of incident. So yeah, either way, it's not a perfect outcome, but that's what kind of guidance there is out there. You may have also heard this thing called an exclusive bike lane, which, probably a decade ago, this was all the rage on busy arterials, and it's still being used, I suppose, but we are looking at more off-road shared path opportunities instead of this. In my mind, if you've ever got the space to exclusively give bicycles a lane, you'd be much better off separating it as well. So it's just a quick mock-up, but if you've already got the space allocated there that's exclusively for bicycles, let's actually put some physical treatment there so we can protect cyclists or at least give improved delineation. So I wouldn't just ever stop at an exclusive bicycle lane. Similarly, these wide curbside bike lanes. Not a big fan of these. I don't think they really offer any safety benefit at all. They're just sporadically kind of breadcrumbs along the network every 200 meters or so, just this ... with a bicycle symbol. I'm not really sure you can say that you're improving safety for cyclists, or you're, you've created a cycling corridor if you're just installing these things, because it's not really going to be helping your general cycle community. Maybe for, Lycra clad cyclists that feel very confident riding amongst traffic, that's not an issue, but yeah, I wouldn't really recommend this as a treatment. I did also say we're going to move on to mixed traffic now. So mixing traffic is where basically cyclists and general traffic all share one lane. This particular road, you can kind of see in the distance there, is where cyclists are actually meant to ride adjacent to the dooring zone. However, the way that this actually functions, generally cyclists take a more central position. Well, I certainly did when I ride down here, just because it's way too narrow to be having a vehicle trying to creep by you and also pushed up right against the dooring zone. So this particular example does unintentionally work as a mixed traffic example. But when you be looking at implementing lane sharing or mixing cyclist and general traffic, is when you've got speeds less than 40 kilometers per hour. And the reason for that, for those that have done any safe system training or aware of the safe system philosophy, there's this idea that, well, we as humans can only withstand so much force before, we will break, before serious injury or fatal incidences will occur. And I might just draw a quick little graph here. Let's see how to go with the graph. It kind of works out as to a curve like this, where along the x-axis is our speed, and that's the speed of a vehicle. It says speed. And then this on the y is the probability of a fatality occurring. So you can imagine, I mean, it's quite clear from that graph already that as speed kind of gets higher and higher and higher, the probability that that will cause a fatal crash also really increases. And there's this point here where things just go up a notch, basically. It really escalates really super quickly. And at this point here, this is what we call kind of the safe system threshold, or the safe system speed is what it's sometimes referred to as. This speed is taken as 30 kilometers per hour, and the rate is 10%. Anyway, I just drew that out there just as a reminder that we typically kind of, in our current thinking, we accept if we can bring speeds between or at 30 kilometers per hour or below for pedestrians and cyclists, that's generally within the survivable realm, or it's at this stage what we're trying to aim for. And we can have a whole debate as to exactly how we can achieve that, but I won't get too stuck into the details. Just something to note how that kind of feeds into this idea here. So this lane sharing idea, you can already see, well, that's 40 kilometers an hour. That's already too fast for those collisions. You said 30. And yes, we don't live in a perfect world where everything brilliantly aligns with safe system principles, but I would expect I wouldn't put a year on it, but we will see those speeds getting reduced, I would expect, because we know that even at 40 kilometers per hour, things are becoming less likely for cyclists to survive in those instances. Between speeds of 40 to 60, we really want to be getting cyclists in protected bicycle lanes, or getting rid of parking as well. Anything greater than 60, let's get them off the road altogether. So how do we actually promote or encourage the idea of sharing the traffic lane? It's through the use of these things here. If you haven't seen this before, this is called a sharrow. It's like a bicycle symbol with the two chevron arrows. And that is indicating both to motorists and to cyclists, okay, cyclists, you can now claim the lane. You can now go into the general traffic lane and you are just another vehicle within that space. So you're now all sharing that zone. That's what it's meant to communicate, and hopefully all the motorists out there know that. But here's an example of one that's shown, and actually I might just zoom into that utility pole because we can see why this is a good example. This is being proposed in a 30 km/h speed zone. So that gets the tick from the safe system approach as well. And to ensure that motorist speeds are not, getting above that, there's lots of, speed humps in the way and other local area traffic management devices to ensure that both cyclists and general traffic are safe to operate and share the lane in that space. Another example here of a 30 with the sharrows there being used. So for those that haven't seen these sharrows before, you can see a cyclist is fully entitled to ride right in the middle of that lane. They don't have to stand, they don't have to ride closer to the curbside or anything like that. They can just ride straight in the middle. That's what the sharrow is communicating. As mentioned, within this space, we do want to make sure that we have local area traffic management devices in place so that motorists aren't tempted to go 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers, 60, etc. They're not going to be able to reach those speeds because there's devices such as this that make sure that we've got lower operating speeds. The reason I include this one, this is an awesome example because it really only impacts vehicles because a cyclist is skinny enough to be able to fit through, curbside along there and also on the way back on both sides. And so they don't have to slow down. They can maintain their speed at 30 km/h. However, general traffic are forced to because they can't fit through there. And I should also point out the 30 km/h does also apply to cyclists. So they also have to travel at that speed zone. Ken.
So is there any benefit to having a sharrow as opposed to a standard bike symbol?
Yeah, so a standard bike symbol, I suppose the sharrow has the specific marketing and communication behind it where we are sharing the lane and it's time for you to claim the lane. That's kind of the definition behind it. So the sharrow is all about cyclists can now claim the lane. A bicycle symbol on its own, it could be used as a means of wayfinding. It could be used as a means of saying, this is where you go and park your bike. It could be used as a means of, that's where the bike rack is. It's used a little bit more broadly. Sharrows is exclusively for claim the lane. You can now take the traffic lane.
Okay. And Cole's put in a link to a video and saying that they're being removed and not recommended in North America, which I'm keen to watch the video. I'll watch that after the session.
Yeah, I'll give that a flick through as well. Thanks, Cole. We've certainly got them across all of our jurisdictions here. I know Western Australia, you've got the smart streets. I can't quite remember the smart active streets or something like that. Can't quite remember the program, but needless to say, lots and lots. Safe
active streets.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Lots of sharrows still being implemented out there. Really good idea in residential zones as well, which already have generally lower speeds, lower volumes. You may not be able to get protected bicycle lanes because the community would not be happy if parking lanes are disturbed. Even one parking day is gone. No, that's not happening. So sharrows are really a common feature in local streets. Really, really true. Another example there of just that little cut through there for cyclists. This one's in New Zealand's. But yeah, just another example of cyclists not having to slow down for the speed hump. It's only the general traffic. Got this example here, which I wanted to just run through. It's another local area traffic management device, which is kind of like a partial closure, it's called. A little bit difficult to hear to see, so I'll just go straight into an aerial view. But as you can see, because of that build out that's shown over there, it's actually blocking that through access for general traffic. And so if a motorist did want to travel down the page, they have to kind of take that movement, which is not very attractive. And you could imagine it's going to, people who may have used this as a rat run, as a little shortcut, they'd be less inclined if they have to do this movement. So that sounds like a good win, because cyclists, they can travel straight through there. No problem. The only issue with this particular example is prior to that being installed, kind of motorists and cyclists just travel straight through there side by side, no problem. Now you've actually introduced two conflict points where a motorist could collide with a cyclist that previously wasn't there. So it's not a perfect example of ways to deter through traffic, but yeah, it's something that has been used. Another example of this, which is a better example, is a full closure. And once again, it's got the exact same design intent. We don't want through traffic here. This is streets only for the residents. We only want cyclists can have a good run through here. That's not an issue. We just don't want streams of traffic. This is not an arterial road. So they had lots of rat running issue on this road. This is the same road. And here they actually put in a full closure. So motorists are unable to drive through there because it's completely built out, and they have to turn around and find their way out of this. It's almost like a little complex now. And that's got a much bigger win because they don't cross the cycle path at all, except when they obviously have to leave. But it's a better design construction than the previous example. And cyclists get to go straight through, and they have the best run of it all. So it's awesome, very handy. So close of today's session. This is another thing not to do. Don't put any barriers where you're expecting cyclists to exit. That's not a handy feature. But I will run through the assignment so you all understand exactly what is required there. Ken, did you want to jump in with any questions?
So just one thing there. Do they find cars turning drift into the cycle lane to increase their turning circle? Probably back on that previous one that you were looking
drift
at.
into the cycle to increase their turn. Yeah, okay. That certainly is an issue. That does happen. And a way that can be managed is I've seen these pop-up treatments that kind of narrow that curb radius going into the minor leg or into the minor street there. So once again, just trying to force motorists to, take an appropriate turning radius going into there as opposed to taking up the bicycle lane. But yeah, it does happen. Yep.
Thank you.
That was all. Yep, cool. I'll share my screen. We'll go through our assignment. Let's get everything ready. Share the screen. All right, you can see the LMS there, Ken?
Yep.
Thanks very much. Okay, so hopefully this is familiar to everyone. Mine will look a little bit different because I'm an administrator, but generally, hopefully doesn't look too foreign. Good to see lots of people have already completed the module 1 quiz, and we're getting lots of 9s and 10s, 8, 9s and 10s. So it's excellent to see. Even like how many Wallies, people are getting that right. We usually get to hide them pretty well. So I've got to make sure I'm going to hide the next ones a little bit trickier, because I think the group's a little bit too astute this time. For module 2, so what we went through today, as I mentioned, there is a VR video, so 360 degree, which has got the on-road facilities. And once again, you'll be shown a couple examples of a protected bicycle lane and then an on-road facility that's adjacent to the Dooring Zone. And if you've never ridden either of those facilities, this will give you a great appreciation as to why I'm so excited and passionate and advocating protected bicycle lanes as opposed to the Dooring Zone. So strongly recommend you watch this one before our next session on Tuesday. And you'll also have to complete our module 2 assignment. So if we click on this one here, you will see that there is a Word document as well as a PDF, and we'll get you to download both of those. And I've already got them open, so just in case anything went funny. So this is the Word document, and we'll just go through the steps. So we're just trying to break everything down to make everything as clear as possible. But if it's not clear, just please do let Ken or I know. Step 1, download and review the module 2 design review file. That's the PDF, that's what it's called. So you're going to have to download that and review it. That will take you to a design plan, which I'll just open up so you can see what that PDF is as well. So you'll download this, and it says Launceston Route, York Street concept plan. Also with this nice disclaimer here in the top left, which is, please don't talk about it outside this course, and please don't write to a local MP or go to council and say, what's this? Because we just want to issue this for training purposes only, just so you've got a real design that you can have a look at and get stuck into. But yes, just something to note. So in York Street, Launceston, it's just that red section that they're considering altering the configuration of the road. And you'll have a look through here and have a look what's changing, what's currently out there. So, okay, looks like there's some, what's that hatched, that says raised surface in the legend. Okay, so they're going to be raising some intersections. They're going to be doing a cycle lane, etc. Go through the different sheets and have a look, just try and get your head around exactly what they're looking at there. And then we'll also get you to review the existing conditions of what York Street currently looks like. So if you click on that link there, that will take you to Google Street View. And York Street, you can drop the little guy. He's got a little balloon. I think it must be his birthday. A little party hat as well. Okay, so this is what York Street currently looks like. Okay, you can drive along there and just see, okay, looks like a pretty big arterial road, and see what you can pop out, things that may be risky, and have a think about, how that would feel if you were a cyclist within that space. So we encourage you to just drop the guy down there and have a look around on Street View. We'll get you to fill out the table below. There's just a few questions. And your final step is to save this document on a local drive and then upload it onto the LMS. Previously, we called it Moodle. So I apologize, that should be updated to LMS. That's just the learning management system. So just upload it to where you downloaded it. Insert your name, just so we've got a record of who completed this form. And the 3 questions are pretty straightforward, but how does the existing environment cater for cyclists? I'll give bonus points if you specify the exact type of treatment. Is it a shared path there? Is it on-road protected bicycle lane? If you could be explicit as to what that is, that'd be fantastic. But if you're not sure of the terminology, flick through the previous modules and see if you can pick it up. Otherwise, just describe it as you see you would within your own terminology. Question 2, how does the design cater for cyclists? So that's when you need to open the PDF and have a look. Okay, well, what's exactly changing? How are things different for cyclists? So we did see that there was a cycle lane there. Has that got a particular type of name, and how does that change things for the safety for cyclists? That's what you can add in that comment there. And the third question, and probably the most important for this activity, is we do want you to actually improve the design. So we're asking what treatments or changes in the design could you recommend to improve the safety for cyclists? So it's pretty open. If your solution is too, far-fetched, or it couldn't possibly happen, if it's to give every cyclist a helicopter so they don't have to ride down there, they can fly across, we won't accept that one, but we're happy for you to be a little bit, reasonable in your assessment. Just think what you could physically change about the design that would improve the safety for cyclists. And your main point of reference will be just going back through the slides that we've gone through and just jotting down some ideas that you've got there. Ken?
Good. Once you're finished, I want to show the YouTube how to get the resolution better. And Cole's popped in another interesting one. I started watching it after Cole put it in, but I paused it. I'll watch it after the session on advisory lanes over in the US as well.
Very good.
So that's good. So they finish all of that, and then what? What do they do with it?
So you can just save this as a document. You can PDF it if you want, whatever works for you, no issues. And then you're going to go back onto our LMS, which is this one here. And at the bottom of this, where you just downloaded everything, there will be a button here that says upload assignment or something like that. And you just click on upload, click on your file, and then we will get a notification saying that Cole has submitted their assignment and it's ready for grading, and we'll be able to review your work and leave you feedback. So hopefully that's clear. We do have a fairly tight time frame, 3 days. So I'm not sure when that is. That's
Monday the 30th, it says. The line above it, Monday 30th.
Yes. No, I was getting lost in this date there. Yeah, Monday the 30th. Thank you, Ken. That's just before the Tuesday session. And the reason for that is so if we do notice any reoccurring issues or themes that are coming from the assignments, we can have a chat through it on Tuesday. So it'd be great if you can get it done before then. I don't really want anyone to spend hours on this assignment. It's not meant to be an arduous exercise. Just flick back through the notes, what we've previously chatted about, and email and submitting dot points is fine. We don't really require lengthy essays or lots of figures and excerpts from different sources. That's not really part of this particular assignment. So hopefully that's clear, but Ken, I might pass over to you.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, well, of course, if you did have any challenges, get in contact with myself or Max. We'll happily walk you through it. I'm just going to show you. So you're seeing the YouTube screen there?
Yep.
Good. Okay, so this is the YouTube that Max was referring to for this session. Down here, if you go settings and you go to quality, see it's on auto. Well, if you bump it up to a high resolution there, some people mentioned that the some of the signs were blurry and things. That should assist there nicely, and you can waiting for you. And of course, if you've got your goggles and your goggles have arrived and you put them together, you can be putting this on your head and then turning your head and having a look as though you're there on the saddle. So good. That was that. Any final questions?
It looks like we might have a few minutes there for participants to maybe get stuck into module 2, the assignment. So I recommend just downloading it now, and you can at least get some of the preparatory work completed, and look forward to seeing you all again on Tuesday, and hope you all have a lovely weekend.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, everyone. Log in a bit early next time for a chance to win a prize with the trivia. Max will have some new and exciting questions. Otherwise, safe riding, and we'll see you next week.
See you then. Bye.